there is nothing worth living for unless it is worth dying for. My grandmother lived a life devoted to Jesus, and today her talks have been made available in their original form. So you too can be built up through the insights and mysteries God revealed to her throughout her ministry. Now, without further ado, here is Elisabeth Elliot.
Well, I'll just talk about what I've been pondering over the last hour or so in my quiet time. It's early in the morning, and I was thinking of a talk that I'm going to be preparing about one of my very favorite verses, Psalm 27. The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? The Lord is the strength of my life. Of whom shall I be afraid? Another translation puts it, the Lord is the stronghold of my life. Of whom shall I be afraid? That verse has sustained me and calmed and comforted me many times. And I was thinking this morning of how God's strength meets us in our weakness. God's light shines for us in our darkness. You know that lovely little song, O Glorious Love? It begins with these words, in my darkness, Jesus found me, touched my eyes and made me see, threw his loving arms around me. And I can't remember the next line, but O glorious love is what it's about. We're told in the New Testament that Jesus is the light of the world. We're also told that we are the light of the world. That's awesome, isn't it? To stop and consider the fact that people are looking to us for light. I grew up in a home where we sang a hymn every day. Very often it was an old gospel song. And one of those that we sang was Let the Lower Lights Be Burning. We live on Massachusetts Bay, and we can see from our house at night 5 different lighthouses down toward Boston, which is southeast of us. And very often on a dark, stormy, wintry night, the flashing of those lights brings to mind that old hymn, the hymn that I just mentioned, and my mind has gone blank. Let the lower lights be burning. And one of the stanzas says, dark the night of sin has settled. Loud the angry billows roar. Eager eyes are watching, longing for the lights along the shore. Let the lower lights be burning, send a gleam across the wave. Some poor, fainting, struggling seaman you may rescue, you may save. Trim your feeble lamp, my brother. Some poor sailor, tempest-tossed, trying now to find the harbor in the darkness may be lost. And then the chorus, let the lower lights be burning. And of course, the great beacon is Jesus himself. He assigns to us the job of shining our smaller lights along the shore. Now, where did I get this? Is it only from this little hymn? No, it's in 2 Corinthians chapter 3, verse 18. And we who with unveiled faces all reflect the Lord's glory are being transformed into his likeness with ever-increasing glory which comes from the Lord, who is the Spirit. We're meant to reflect his glory. And then in the next chapter, he goes right on to say, since through God's mercy we have this ministry, we do not lose heart. And he tells us that the God of this age has blinded the minds of unbelievers so that they can't see the light of the gospel of the glory of Christ, who is the image of God. But God's light has shone into our hearts to give us, as verse 6 says, the light of the knowledge of the glory of God in the face of Christ. When I lived with the Auca Indians, I learned about clay pots. They had huge clay pots that the women made out of the same old mud. Everybody had the same design. Everybody had the same material to work with, and pretty much the same things to put in their pots. It was usually manioc and sometimes monkey meat. But I thought a lot about the fact that in this 4th chapter of 2 Corinthians, we're told that we are treasures, that we have the treasure in a jar of clay. The treasure is the one I just read about in verse 6, the light of the knowledge of the glory of God in the face of Christ. Verse 7 says we have this treasure in jars of clay to show that this all-surpassing power is from God and not from us. Those Indians didn't have the foggiest notion why I was there. They really thought that I was there because I didn't like my own home country and I had come to find a better one. They didn't know about the light of the knowledge of the glory of God in the face of Jesus Christ. But Paul goes on to let us know that we are going to have to pay a price in order to shine. There's going to be a certain measure of difficulty, tribulation, adversity, and real downright suffering. And Paul puts it this way: we are hard pressed on every side. Anybody listening to me now that feels hard pressed? Hard pressed on every side, but not crushed. Perplexed, but not in despair. Persecuted, but not abandoned. Struck down, but not destroyed. We always carry around in our body the death of Jesus. Seems like a strange phrase, doesn't it? Carrying around in our body the death of Jesus. But he has already specified some of the ways in which that death goes to work in us. Hard-pressed, crushed, persecuted, struck down. But he says the reason why we are being given over to death is so that the life of Jesus may also be revealed in our body. The world is looking for those lower lights that should be burning along the shore. We who are alive are always being given over to death for Jesus' sake, so that his life may be revealed in our mortal body. The Lord is my light, and the Lord tells us that we are to shine for him. And the rest of that verse from Psalm 27, the Lord is the stronghold of my life. In my weakness, the Lord comes to me. In my fears, in my inability to do what I want to do, to glorify him the way I want to glorify him, I cannot do it in my own strength, but the Lord is the stronghold of my life. Has anyone ever said to you, well, you're such a strong person, I could never do what you do? Probably your answer to them would be, it's not my strength, it's the Lord's. All of us are weak. We are poor and wretched and miserable and blind without the Lord. But he comes to make us rich, to save us, to help us, to give us his strength, and to actually make us lights in the world. I've been reading an old book of advice to women in their troubles, written by a spiritual director. And he refers to his own troubles of being tempted to fear, and then being tempted to fear the fear, and then to fear the fear of the fear. I know exactly what he's talking about. I get upset. Then I get upset at being upset. And then I'm upset for being upset at what upsets me. And we tie ourselves in knots, don't we? We get so upset because of something that somebody said. That person who sort of cut me off, maybe said something really hateful, or perhaps just in a very casual, offhand, maybe flippant way, said something silly about us that we thought, that really was a deep jab that she gave me. She wanted me to think it was silly and that she was just saying it in fun, but many a true word is spoken in jest. And we get upset and we wonder, what are people saying about me? What will the neighbors think? What do the people in the church think about me? It's a dreadful din, isn't it? The noise of words. Amy Carmichael wrote a poem which begins, O thou who art my quietness, my deep repose, my rest from strife of tongues, my holy hill. Fair is thy pavilion where I hold me still. Do you need that rest from strife of tongues? The Lord is our quietness. He wants us to keep a quiet heart, to rest in the Lord, to really believe that we are loved with an everlasting love, that we are held in the everlasting arms. It's a weakness in us, isn't it, to be disturbed by trifles. Not only something that somebody said, but you might be disturbed by what you think they thought. Oh dear, we need to learn to laugh at small troubles. Don't let them interrupt your constancy, your service for the Lord, your cheerfulness in your home, your faithful working at the duties that the Lord has given you. Don't let them interrupt those things. Turn away to some task. Do you know that old maxim, do the next thing? It simplifies your life. Go to sleep in the arms of Jesus. Refuse those thoughts, that weakness, and rest in Him who is the stronghold of your life. You are loved with an everlasting love, and underneath are the everlasting arms. The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? Am I speaking to someone today who is fearing the future? That is a strong temptation for all of us, isn't it? To fear what might happen tomorrow. Everything is more or less okay today, but what about tomorrow? What's going to happen? Well, let me read you another quotation from one of these old writers that I consider my tutors. His name was Fenelon back in the 17th century, and he also was a spiritual director to women. And in one of his letters, he says, I had hoped, madam, to find you here, and was rejoicing in that hope. But God has sent you elsewhere. The best place is wherever He puts us, and any other would be undesirable. All the worse because it would please our fancy and would be of our own choice. Don't think about distant events. This uneasiness about the future is unwholesome for you. We must leave to God all that depends on Him, and think only of being faithful in all that depends upon ourselves. When God takes away that which He has given you, He knows well how to replace it, either through other means or by Himself. The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? The Lord is the stronghold of my life. Of whom shall I be afraid?
I pray you've been encouraged and inspired by what you've heard today, and will keep joining us here and on social media for My Granny's inspiration. Until then, remember, the eternal God is your refuge, and underneath are the everlasting arms.